so I don't even have time for introduction. But basically, the title of today's lesson will be the introduction. The title is God's Blessings and God's Curses. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory as we study these two chapters in depth, why I titled it that way. So let's turn to Genesis chapter 18. And again, we do verse by verse study. So let me read. Chapter 18, verse 1. And the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing in front of him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, O Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree, while I bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant. So they said, do as you have said. Okay, let's stop right there. So we have an encounter here with the God himself, and he brought his 2 angels with him. Now, there's a speculation that this could have been God the Father or even Jesus the Son. Theophany, where God shows himself to Abram in the form of a man. And do you guys know who Matthew Henry is? Matthew Henry is a Puritan during the 16th century in England. And he wrote an extensive commentary of the whole Bible, which George Whitefield used his life saving to buy that commentary. It was a treasure to him, and he used that as his resource. And do you guys know who George Whitefield is? I hope so. If you don't know him, look him up. You need to, because he's arguably the greatest evangelist, preacher in the history of the world. A person that comes very close to Apostle Paul, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. So anyway, Matthew Henry believes that it was possibly the Son, because there's 2 reasons why God shows up here to Abraham. And the first reason is the blessings that I'm going to talk about, and the second one is the curses. So what he's doing now is just common practice of hospitality during those times back then. It was one of the most valued, ethics or virtues at that time, when you honor the strangers, sojourners we call them, in providing hospitality. Now in today's time, it's kind of hard to imagine that, because we don't value that as much. I mean, when you see some stranger come by your door, do you invite them into your house all the time and, hey, have some meal with us? You don't know who they are. But back in those days, it was very common practice. Even to some enemies, they would perform this act of kindness towards them. So this is nothing new. Now, some commentators believe that Abraham at this time had no idea there was God and 2 angels, that these were just some strangers. I tend to think otherwise. I think Abraham knew immediately there was God and the 2 angels here. So he offers them to come and dine with him, refresh themselves. So let's move on. Verse 6. And Abraham went quickly into the tent to Sarah and said, Quick, 3 seahs of fine flour, knead it and make cakes. And Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to a young man, who prepared it quickly. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree while they ate. Okay, so he offered initially some morsel of bread and some water, but now he's doing much more than that. I think it's common practice at that time, where you don't want to burden the guest, thinking that, I'm going to give you so much extravagant things, because they might say, oh, no, that's too much. But just offer them something simple and then give them all the good stuff. And I think at this time here, you can see Abram's reaction here. There's a sense of urgency. He says he quickly into the tent. He ran to meet the strangers. And it says Abraham took a calf, tender and good. So he takes one of his best calves to prepare the meal for these three people here. Verse 9. They said to him, "Where is Sarah your wife?" And he said, "She is in the tent." The Lord said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind them. Okay, let's stop right here. So remember, last week, the same thing. God already told Abraham what he's going to do, right? In a year, Sarah's going to conceive a child. Now he's coming to Abraham again to confirm his promise, his blessing upon Abraham and Sarah. Let's continue. Verse 11. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of woman had ceased to be with Sarah. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure?" Okay, let's stop right there. Now, you can imagine what Sarah is thinking right now. How old is Sarah? You guys know? You guys remember?
Something like 89 or something?
Yeah, she's 90 years old, and Abram's pushing 100. It's kind of inconceivable for us to think about that. But I think during that time, though, they lived a little longer, remember? So maybe Sarah didn't look as old as 90. But still, you notice two things here why Sarah would laugh. First of all, it says, the way of woman has ceased to be with Sarah. That's a euphemism during that time to talk about the fact that her menstrual cycle has ceased, which means she has no eggs. It is impossible for her to get pregnant. How do you get pregnant without an egg? Especially during that time. Second thing, she said, after laughing, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure?" Okay. What pleasure is she talking about? It's logical. It's the only one you can think of. I mean, they're so old, and she stopped having eggs, so she's thinking, what is the point of even trying to have a baby? And she said, I'm worn out. I'm too tired for this thing, you know? I'd rather read a book, do some knitting or something like that. You know, I have no desire for pleasure here. That's what she's saying. So at this point, there's two impossibilities here. Let's make it crystal clear why Sarah would laugh. It's impossible physically, and we're not even having sexual relation. How in the world is God telling me I'm going to have a baby? I think God is mistaken here. He doesn't understand what's going on. That's what Sarah's thinking. Let's move on here. Verse 13. The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son." Let's stop right there. Now, I want you to think about this incredible blessing that God is giving to Sarah and Abraham. Now, what stands out to me is the graciousness of God here. Remember what happened a few chapters earlier? Sarah and Abraham got impatient and said, we got to help God out here. I mean, obviously, something's not working here. God's, being lazy, or, he's not thinking about us. And Sarah acts out in sin by not waiting on the Lord and comes up with a plan. I will give you my handmaid Hagar. Hagar. And you can lie with her and have a baby that way. That's a great sin. Now think about this. At the time, do you see any mention of Abraham after listening to Sarah's counsel saying, praying to God, "God, is this something that I should engage in?" the scriptures clearly say that he said, well, this sounds like a great idea. And he just goes for it without waiting on the Lord, without consulting God. That's sin. Now, when God shows up here to give this blessing, he doesn't mention anything like that. Why is he so gracious to Abraham and Sarah? Even after Sarah laughs, it's a perfect time where God could seriously scold Sarah, right? How dare you laugh? All the mess that you made, I'm here to fix that, and you're laughing? But God is not happy, obviously. He's very stern. And he questions Sarah now. Watch. Verse 15. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. And look at God's response. He said, no, but you did laugh. And that's the end of it. Amazing grace again. He just confronts her. You think you lied to God? I mean, Sarah's very unwise here, as you can see. How does she think she can lie to God and get away with it, thinking that God would not know? If you go back, you notice, is anything too difficult for God? I mean, he's all-knowing, all-powerful, all-sovereign God. He can do anything that he pleases. Now, before we continue to read on, I think this is fascinating here. That when God shows up here to Abraham and Sarah and give this incredible blessing, remember in the past chapter we read where Rob covered, from you, Sarah and Abraham, you're going to have a child, and from him, many kings will come. And obviously, Rob mentioned before that ultimately the King of Kings will come from their seed. This is an incredible blessing upon them. But you noticed there's a similarity between, because I think there's a foreshadowing here of the birth of Christ. And the reason why I say that, how was Jesus conceived? Through an incredible miracle. Remember that? Virgin birth. Virgin Mary giving birth. This situation here is very similar. Again, I mentioned earlier, there's no egg, and there's maybe no even sperm, because they're not engaging in sexual activity, yet she does have a child. Exactly a year from when the God and the two angels visit them. You see that incredible miracle, similarity, parallel that's running through there? Again, just incredible blessing upon Sarah and Abram that they don't deserve. Abram laughed a few chapters earlier, now Sarah's laughing, and she's lying about it. But again, God deals with them with incredible grace and mercy here. Okay, so that's the first part, the blessing. Now the cursing here. And this is throughout the rest of the chapter, 18 and 19. Let's look at 16 here. Then the man set out from there, and they looked down towards Sodom. And Abraham went with them to set them on the way. The Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have chosen him that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him. Let's stop right there. So, picture this. Abraham and Lord is walking side by side. That's incredible to me. God and man walking together side by side. And God knows what he's going to do to Sodom and Gomorrah, right? And he's saying this. Shall I reveal this to Abraham? And the commentator mentioned two reasons. First reason is to contrast this great blessing that God has just shown Abraham and Sarah versus the incredible, horrible judgment that's going to be coming up on Sodom and Gomorrah. The other reason is that Abraham will see this, what's going to happen to Sodom and Gomorrah, and teach his children, like Isaac and his children, about the danger of falling away from God and doing wicked things. Makes perfect sense. Let's continue. So, verse 20. Then the Lord said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me. And if not, I will know. Now, this sounds kind of strange here. Is God saying, I'm not really sure here if the outcry is legit? Is it an exaggeration? I think I need to go down there to see for myself because I'm not sure. Is that what God's saying here? No. But I think what he's saying here is I'm going to be fair to the Sodom and Gomorrah. And I'm going to send my 2 angels. And what's going to happen is, as we're going to read shortly, exactly how depraved these people were as an evidence against them and how they treat those 2 angels. I think that's the point here. Before that happens, though, let's read on in verse 22. So the man turned from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord. Then Abraham drew near and said, will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be it that from you. Shall not the judge of the earth do what is just? Let's stop right there. This is incredible boldness here. It's like Abram's kind of trying to teach God something about justice here. With good intentions. Obviously, Abram knows that his nephew Lot and his family is living in Sodom and Gomorrah. He doesn't want them to be destroyed. So he knows that God is compassionate and merciful, so he plays on that. But the way he asks is very bold. Almost saying, God, aren't you righteous? If you're righteous, you surely not do this thing. What if there's 50 righteous people? Surely you're not going to destroy the rest of the righteous along with the wicked. That's not right, is it? Kind of questioning God. Now, the response again from the Lord is incredible. I mean, he's so merciful here. Look what he says here. And the Lord said, if I find that Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake. That's all he says. Yeah, if you find 50, I will spare the whole city. The response here is very different from the response that God gave to Job. Remember Job? When Job was in great distress and he was crying out to God, God finally shows up after all his sufferings, and God scolds Job and saying, who are you to ask these questions? Who are you? Were you there when I set the boundaries? How far can the ocean come? All the stars and the moon and all the animals that I created. Were you there? Explain to me how that happens. He doesn't say that here. This is incredible. He says, yeah, if they find 50 righteous, for their sake, I will not destroy the city. Now it gets better. Let's move on. Verse 27. Abraham answered and said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord, I who am but dust and ashes. Okay, so Abraham's now more wise now, because he realized, I think, after he said what he said first time, I think that was kind of too strong there. Now he's saying, I am but dust and ashes. I'm worthless. And I realize that. So please be merciful, gracious to me. Suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for the lack of 5? So 45, he's saying. How about 45? Because he realized there's no 50 righteous. So how about 45 here, oh God? So he's bargaining with God. And by the way, the commentator suggests that this was common bartering practice in the markets during the Middle East. And for some reason, Korea too. Korean people like to barter. Like they have $50 for the Nike shoes, you're supposed to say, how about 45? No, 40, and stuff like that. But anyway, I guess a lot of cultures have that kind of custom. It makes sense. Everyone likes to get a bargain, right? So that's what Abram's doing here. And God said, and he said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. Again, verse 29, again he spoke to him and said, suppose 40 are found there. And he answered, for the sake of the 40, I will not do it. Then he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, because now he knows he's pushing the boundaries here. Yeah? Abram's smart, he knows. And I'll speak, suppose 30 are found there. He answered, I would not do it if I find 30 there. I mean, God is so patient here. Isn't it incredible? He said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there. He answered, for the sake of the 20, I will not destroy it. Then he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak again, but this once. So he knows now he can only push so far. And he says, suppose 10 are found there. Just 10 people, from 50 to 10. He answered, for the sake of 10, I will not destroy it. And look how the conversation ends. And the Lord went his way when he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. So Abraham kept his promise. He said, the last time I'm going to speak to you, and it was the last time he spoke. Wise. So basically, what happened here? Sadly, there was not 10 righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah that God would spare the whole city. Not 10. Now, I'm going to ask you a question at the end of the lesson. I'm going to ask you, what do you think, how many people were really righteous in Sodom and Gomorrah? There's no right answer, because the Bible doesn't say, yeah, in fact, there was 5 or 1 or 3 righteous people after all. It doesn't say that. But I think we can kind of take an educated guess, and I'm going to tell you my opinion, and you can think on your own what we think the answer is. Chapter 19, verse 1. So the 2 angels now came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed himself with his face to the earth and said, my lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early and go on your way. They said, no, we will spend the night in the town square. But he pressed them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Let's stop right there. So these 2 angels, did they spend time with Abraham? They made their way down, because Sodom and Gomorrah was located by the Dead Sea. That's the lowest altitude, right, on earth. So they're going down, and as they got there, I guess it took them a few hours to get there. I don't know how many miles away it was, but they were walking. So it took some time, and it's about evening now. And as they approach, Lot sees them, and immediately, with urgency, invites them to his house. You know why he's doing that? Because there's wicked people in Sodom. We're going to see that more in detail. And especially when the angel says, no, I don't need to go to your house. I'll just spend the night at the square town center, and saying, no, don't do that. And he pressed them with urgency, strongly. Don't do that. It's not wise, because he knows the evil people that are surrounding the city here, or living in the city. And again, his offering hospitality in those days. Come into our house, drink some water, have some bread, have some food. Verse 4. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man surrounded the house, and they called to Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them. Let's stop right there. This is amazing, the description here. So as soon as they saw these 2 men, I don't know how they knew these 2 men were coming. It was just common practice to see, what prey there are, what new strangers might be wandering into their city. But that seems like that's what they're doing. As soon as they saw them, right? Both young and old, all the people to the last man. Now, I think it's a little bit of exaggeration here. I don't think every man from the whole two cities came here, but it's a description of vast majority of the people who came here and surrounded the house like a mob. So a mob has formed here. Why? Because there's two men, two visitors came. And they boldly, brazenly speaks out. They're unashamed. It says, where are the men who came to you tonight? It says, bring them out, that we may know them, so we may rape them, have sex with them. That's what they're saying. It's incredible. What wickedness displayed here. They have no shame whatsoever. And look at Lot's response here. Verse 6. So Lot went out to the men at the entrance, shut the door after him, and said, I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. Let's stop right there. Now we get a little idea of the mentality of Lot, how messed up he is. This is very foolish. What kind of father are you, Lot? You would offer your daughters for them to be raped by these wicked, wicked men? So you want to avoid one sin, but offer them another sin? Does that make sense? So apparently, Lot's thinking is not right here. And I think there's many reasons why. When you live amongst the wicked people in Sodom for I don't know how many years, you become saturated with their sins, the way of their life. And you're not thinking clearly, even though you're a righteous man, even if you're a person who seeks after God. That's an important lesson here. Now, look at the response now. Verse 9. But they said, stand back. And they said, this fellow came to sojourn, and he has become the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. Then they pressed hard against the man Lot and drew near to break the door down. Okay, let's stop right there. So, they don't want women, they want men. These are homosexuals. I don't know if they're bisexuals, but obviously they're homosexuals. And they're not interested in women, they're interested in men. And they get angry with Lot, saying, who do you think you are? Who made you judge here? You're just a sojourner. You're not even a citizen in our city. You're not from here. What gives you the right to judge us and say stuff like, don't do wickedly? I will show you. And they're about to maybe rape him. These are wicked, wicked people, to be sure. Now, verse 10. But the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them, and they shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the house, both small and great, so that they wore themselves out groping for the door. Okay, let's stop right there. So now the angels that Lot was trying to protect, the role has reversed. Now the angels are protecting Lot, and they saved Lot from this mob. And what do? They shut the door, and they do a miracle here, a judgment, of striking everyone there, the men who were trying to rape those 2 angels, with blindness. They're stone cold blind, they can't see anything. Now, think about that. If you're one of those people, and you got struck with blindness for your wicked sin, what should your response be, even though you're a wicked sinner, a sodomite? I think I would have said, oh God, I'm sorry, forgive me, and repent. I want to see. I'll go back to my house. I'll never come back here. But look what he says here. I'll read it again. they wore themselves out groping for the door. So they're not giving up. They're still trying to rape these two angels. When they're blind, they're still looking for the door. Does that sound believable, even? I wouldn't believe it unless it was in the scripture. It's hard to imagine the wickedness that these people were possessed with. And that's why I said earlier, by sending these two angels, this is the indictment, witness of their great, great wickedness that's beyond our even comprehension. These people are depraved to the core. Unbelievable. Let's move on. Verse 12. Then the man said to Lot, have you anyone else here, son-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of the place. For we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. Okay, let's stop right there. From now to the rest of the chapter, the theme is going to be blindness. We just saw the blindness of these wicked people that angels caused in judgment. Now we're going to see an overwhelming theme that comes up again about blindness. And what I think that represents is, that's the explanation of what sin is, blindness. You think about it. When people look at this world and they enjoy the creation, right? They see the wonderful beaches, the bright sun that gives them warmth, the mountains, majestic mountains, and the vast ocean, and they're overwhelmed by that. And they love it. They give praise. But they're blind because they don't praise the one who made all those things. That's what sin is. Failure to see the greatness of God in all things. Physically, they see His creation, but not the Creator. That's what ultimately sin is. And that's what we're going to see here over and over again. Spiritual blindness, physical blindness. Verse 14. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters. Remember those two daughters that he was willing to give up to those wicked people? It says, up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. So he sternly warns them, get out of here. God's going to destroy the city. You're going to perish unless you flee from this place immediately. But look at the response here. But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting. They think it's a big joke. Again, here's blindness. The sons-in-law, don't you see the wickedness of these people? How long have you been living there? You see these sodomites, homosexuals abusing people. You know they're wicked, don't you? So why are you surprised? Why do you think it's a joke that Lot is telling you to get out of this place because God's going to judge this wicked, wicked city? Because they're blind. To them, it's not that wicked. Maybe they even enjoyed living in that city for whatever reason. Total blindness. So again, there's theme of blindness right there. Verse 15, as morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, up, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city. Verse 16, but he lingered. So the man seized him and his wife and his two daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. Let's stop right there. Amazing. Why is Lot lingering here? He's blind. Not as bad as those sons-in-law. He knows it's real. He saw what those angels did to those wicked people. And he knows judgment is coming, yet he still lingers. Perhaps this is even a greater blindness here. So why do you think he's lingering? He's comfortable.
He's attached to his possessions, and he's attached to the world and what the world has given him, and he doesn't have any, he's attached. He doesn't want to leave what he knows.
Exactly. He has become comfortable with living in Sodom and Gomorrah. though it was so sinful that God had no choice but to destroy it, he was so comfortable living there. He kind of missed it. Like you said, possessions, his house, his friends. So he lingers. Amazing. So that the angels had to even kind of force him to get out of there. Forcefully seize them by the hand and kind of drag them out. Let's get out of here. Verse 17. And as they brought them out, one said, "Escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away." And Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lords, behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life, but I cannot escape to the hills, lest the disaster overtake me and I die. Behold, the city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Let me escape there. It is not a little one, and my life will be saved." He said to them, "Behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Escape there quickly, for I can do nothing till you arrive there." Therefore, the name of the city was called Zor. Okay. So again, for whatever reason, Lot is compromising here. If I was told that you need to get out of here as fast as possible, I would run as fast as I could, and I wouldn't look back. I don't want to die. I don't want to be judged by God's wrath. It's the worst way to die, right? But he's compromising. He's saying, I don't know for what reason. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was distraught that the cities were destroyed. But he says, there's a small, tiny town there. Can I just go there instead? Maybe he's still attached to living in a city. He don't want to go up to the hills in the wilderness. It's uncomfortable. And look, God is so merciful. He could have been angry, saying, "You know what? Forget this, man. You die. I gave you too many opportunities." But no, he's merciful. He says, "Okay, go ahead. Go to Zor." Now let's move on. 23. The sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zor. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind them looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Okay, let's stop right there. Here's another blindness in the form of Lot's wife. She disobeyed God. The angels told her specifically, and the others that were fleeing, do not look back. And she disobeys. Again, I think she looks back because the commentators believe she longed for a home. It was heartbreaking for her to see her beloved, wicked city destroyed, and her home, and her friends. Again, it's blindness. How can you be attached to the wicked, wicked place? When your whole life is saturated with sin, that's what happens. So she dies. She had her chance. 27. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. And he looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the valley. And he looked, and behold, the smoke of the land went up to like the smoke of a furnace. So it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived. So again here, Abram's looking at those burning cities, the smoke going up. But God is merciful. He remembered Abraham, meaning he knew Abraham wanted Lot to be saved. And God is faithful. He rescues Lot from certain death, for the sake of Abraham, I believe here. Verse 30. Now Lot went up out of Zoar and lived in the hills with his two daughters, for he was afraid to live in Zoar. So he lived in a cave with his two daughters. Okay, so remember he requested that he go to Zoar instead of up the hills, but now he's fleeing Zoar and going up to the hills. So what's going on here? Well, the scripture doesn't specifically say why, but we can kind of take an educated guess, speculate, yeah? I believe because when the town people of Zoar saw this guy Lot and his two daughters, escaping those burning cities, they're like, what happened, man? Well, why did God destroy those two cities? And they're suspicious. Maybe it was because of you. That's why you're fleeing. Or maybe the people in Zoar are just like the Sodomites, most likely. And maybe they wanted to rape Lot and his two daughters, most likely. So he was afraid of them, of the people. See, it's sad. And now they're out of Zoar and they're living up in the hills in a cave. And it gets really, really bad. Verse 31. And the firstborn said to the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to come in to us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father. He did not know when she lay down or when she arose. The next day, the firstborn said to the younger, behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine tonight also. Then you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father. So they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Let's stop right there. Here's the final blindness that I'm talking about, the theme of blindness. How drunk a person must be to not know that you had sex with somebody. This is incredible. Really? It's unbelievable, right? Now, my question is, I have many questions. First of all, where did they get the wine from? You're fleeing your home, and I'm thinking you're going to take some valuable possessions, right? Is wine like one of your valuable possessions? So I think that kind of speaks of their mentality here. Apparently so. Maybe Lot was used to getting drunk, getting wasted. And my other question is, Lot, you just lost your wife. You lost your home. Your two daughters need you to be the strong father, a godly father who will comfort them. What are you doing getting drunk? What is wrong with you? That's my question. And Lot is just spiritually bankrupt at this point. He fails to be the father that he needs to be, spiritual father, and commits this horrible act. And you might say, well, it's all daughter's fault. They got him drunk. No, I think they're equally liable. Because like I said, as a father, if you're a godly father, why would you get drunk in a time like this? It's time to be sober, not drunk. So to me, this is just tragic, and it speaks volume about the spiritual bankruptcy of Lot, even though he's called a righteous man, believe it or not. Okay, so let's finish it up here. So, does this, verse 36, both the daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father? Isn't that terrible? The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab, which means, by the way, from the father. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. The younger also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ammi. He is the father of the Ammonites to this day. And you guys know the Moabites and the Ammonites were constant thorn in the flesh of the people of Israel, constant enemies. So what a legacy that Lot leaves, a tragic legacy. Originally started off well, with faith, with Abraham, left their hometown. And look at Abram's life, how different from Lot's is. Now, I want you to pay attention to this one thing here. You notice the difference between Lot's mentality and Abram's mentality here. Abram was still living in tents. He wasn't a guy who's going to settle here on earth as a permanent home. That should be all of our mentality here. Our home is not here on earth. Wherever you live, Eva Beach, Makakilo, Kapolei, Pro City, for me, that's not our home. This life is a journey. It's like one long road trip. Our home is in heaven. That's where God is. That's where we want to go. We don't want to linger here like Lot and suffer the consequences. You treasure your home, this life now, these kind of things will happen to you. Because you cannot serve two masters, Jesus said, remember? You're going to despise the one and love the other. The question is, do you love your heavenly home? Is that your deepest desire, your hope and joy and peace? Or is it this broken down world here? It's full of sin and brokenness, perversion, wickedness. I think that's the lesson that we must learn here. Now, let me ask you this question. So, how many righteous people were in Sodom and Gomorrah? 2 Peter chapter 2. Trust me, it's going to take 5 minutes. We're almost done. I know I'm kind of going over. Chapter 2, Peter, verse 4. I'm going to read it, okay? For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly, if by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly. And if he rescued righteous Lot here, greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked, for as that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over their lawless deeds that he saw and heard. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and to keep the unrighteous under punishment until the day of judgment, and especially those who indulge in the lust of defiling passion and despise authority. So, to sum it up here, the scripture mentions Lot as only being the righteous person, repeatedly. Righteous soul. He was tormented by those wicked deeds that he was witnessing, right? So clearly, Lot was considered righteous. All those things, the flood, the angels being changed in gloomy darkness to the day of the final judgment, flood, Sodom and Gomorrah, all those things are a warning to people. So you know what? Maybe next time you share the gospel with people, go there first before you get to John 3:16. Seriously. Because we love to talk about the mercy of God, right? God so loved the world. Well, there's the other flip of the coin. There's great wrath and judgment if you do not repent. Think about that.